Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Weekly Spark. I'm doing a voiceover of this one. I worked on this spread during the afternoon. It was pretty warm in the studio, and I had the fan running, and I had the dog with me. So I decided first off that I would use a limited palette. I've got Titan Buff, Yellow Ochre, some Alizarin Crimson, and some Burnt Sienna and some Raw Umber. Not my normal color palette, so I was trying to limit myself and yet create a palette that was harmonious and that was going to inspire me. I do plan on using this Triquetra stencil from last week's video, and I often call it a Triskel, so forgive me on that one. But you'll see that I also have gathered some King Art wax crayons, water-soluble type, and then, of course, my tray of scraps. So first things first, I just took the acrylic and started with a base layer on the page. I tried to select papers that were in the same kind of harmonious color palette as the paint that I'd started with. Forgive me if I sound a little hoarse. I do have a summer cold, and so that was another reason to do a voiceover when I could have, a beverage here and soothe my throat. I love doing these layers. Now, sometimes I'll start with the paper collaged in first and then paint over. This time I did the paint first and then collaged over. But you can see I also used the water-soluble King Art to make some marks on the page, which I then used a wet brush to kind of blend in. So adding my paper and then doing some more marks on top so that I can marry the layers together and have the paper be part of the collage and not just stuck on top. So my thought process with this art journal spread was to play with the stencil and layer it in and try using it with different materials, seeing if I could get some hazier versions, some more solid versions, and really just to play around and experiment. First things first, I've got some acrylic paint in burnt sienna, alizarin crimson, and yellow ochre, and I'm going to stencil that in just straight up. So that's kind of going to be the focal point, the most clear of the versions. I wanted to try using a spray, and I decided I would just use a brown watercolor spray. So of course I've got to protect the other surfaces, but then I wanted to give the stencil just a spritz and try, see how clearly it would read without, a traditional method. Because it was so wet, I also decided I would flip that over and blot that on the other side and see if I could get kind of the reverse image, which shows up a little bit. I'm going to go back into that in a few minutes. These distress sprays would have been great if they were opaque, but they're very, very translucent. And so I didn't get what I was hoping for. I didn't get something that would read clearly on the darker colors that were already on the art journal spread. So that one is a little bit of, not a failure, but it wasn't what I hoped for. It's subtle. It blends in the background. But I wanted to add something else to this page because I felt it needed more. Whereas the left-hand side's really clear and you have the nice contrast of the painted stencil and the sprayed stencil. So in keeping with kind of the, source of the Triquetra being kind of Celtic, I did go in with this Celtic stencil. It also didn't come out as bold and clear and contrasty as I would have liked. Perhaps if I had mixed a little white in with my yellow ochre, I would have gotten a bit more pop or had it read more clearly. So here I wanted to go back into this Triskel that was the Triskel. See, I did it. Triquetra. That was the reverse image. So I have a Posca pen that is in this kind of wine burgundy color, and I'm trying not to trace the whole thing, but just to pick out spots where I can make it appear more, emerge out of the background. All in all, I really enjoyed making this art journal spread. Visually, I'm very happy with the left-hand side. The right-hand side is a little bit more cluttered. It doesn't really have a focal point. Feels a little bit messy to me, but I enjoyed a different color palette for me. I enjoyed working with the new stencil, which I think worked really well. I'm going to keep working with this theme next week, so please feel free to like this channel and subscribe, and I hope to see you for the Weekly Spark next Wednesday.